You probably cost me about 7,000 votes for that little clip, Eileen.
Oh, good to see you, Fred. It's been about 11 years since I've seen you.
Monroe, Louisiana.
Yeah, cerebral palsy telethon.
That's right.
You have such a heart. You even remembered one of the little boys that was one of the cerebral palsy kids.
Who could forget that little kid on the skateboard that sang "Will I Be a Crippled Boy in Heaven"? Remember that?
Oh, I know. But you have quite a memory to remember that. What a switch for you. Northwestern congressional seat in Iowa, right?
That's right. The northwest corner of Iowa, which goes from Sioux City, which is my hometown, over to Mason City, which is in the northern central part of the state.
Why? Why do you turn down $1 million a year job for one that pays $75,100 a year?
Well, not for the money, I'll tell you that.
Well, that's for sure.
I do it because, in terms of my own life, I've had a very long and, to me, productive career in show business, and I don't have any more dragons to slay there. I've really completed a cycle there. In terms of going home, I think Iowa needs some people like me to come back because their image is so poor right now, right? When people talk about Iowa to me, they talk about two things, football and foreclosures. And that's
Farm foreclosures.
Of course. And it's not a great incentive to retool the economy, which is what we have to do in that state right now. Agriculture there is contracting the way the industrial Northeast contracted about 10 years ago, the way the fishing industry contracted up here. And it's a rites of passage in a way. But you need, I think now, people in government that are communicators. And I think that we have not had that. I don't think our image is as strong as it can be. And for me, it's a proper time to go back. I've lived one life, and now I think I've got enough energy and hopefully enough stamina to do this.
We'll go back to politics maybe after, we'll wrap that around the break. But let's go back to earlier years. It wasn't easy for you to lose your dad at age 12 and then your mother a year later. But your mother's best friend, Margaret Avery, then, became your guardian, didn't she?
Yeah, and essentially became my mother, too, because I've known her now since. As a matter of fact, she just threw a big fundraiser for me in Sioux City, and it was very heartwarming because all of these old friends that I really have not seen for, in some cases, 20 years, showed up, gave me their support, gave me their checks, which is their support, too. And it's a very, I don't know, it's a feeling of you can go home again.
Then she married the doctor that actually cared for your dad, and ultimately you ended up at Phillips Exeter Academy, which is quite a good beginning for education, isn't it?
It is. It is a place that I think probably affected my life as much as anything that's ever happened to me.
Why?
Because it was such a melting pot for the United States and the world. I met the people that I went to school there with have become my oldest friends in California, in New York, in Boston. I guess when you go through puberty together, you stay together. I can't think of any other reason why.
Rona Jaffe writes about that. David Eisenhower was your roommate.
And as a matter of fact, David Eisenhower has been very helpful to me in this campaign. Interesting that you were, of course, at David and Julie's wedding. And they were at mine.
Yeah, and then got involved with the Nixon, well, you got to know Nixon. You almost joined CREEP, the Committee for Re-Election of Nixon, but you smelled out Watergate in a way, didn't you?
Well, I did. It wasn't known as Watergate then, but there was when I was working on Capitol Hill in 1970, the committee to re-elect the president was really the hottest job in town for young Republicans. If you could get a job there, you really had a career in the political system. But the downside of that was there was a lot of information that just wasn't quite washing. The information system was breaking down, and there were certain people that were controlling it. It was very hard to get to see H.R. Haldeman, John Ehrlichman. And I remember there was a real fallout on the Hill among Republican members of Congress saying, why can't we get to the president any better? And CREEP was an extension of that roadblock. So it was probably the best political decision I never made to not go to that committee.
Have you ever thought of what would have happened had you gone that way?
Well, I probably would have become a very successful book writer. And
like Charles Colson and some of the others.
And a good paper shredder, probably. All of those skills that you need.
That was, of course, after Harvard. And Harvard must have been wonderful. Good days there?
Yeah, you have to remember that in 1966 through 1970, Harvard was probably the crucible of American student unrest. So it was quite a change to go from a very liberal orientation to a very conservative orientation in Washington a year later. It was really rhetoric bumping up against reality in terms of what I thought government should be and what it could be and what it really was. So I think perhaps those two polarities forged whatever kind of political sentiments I have today.
Interesting. I mean, you say you live life in cycles. We'll take a break and come back and talk about how your constituents in show business are supporting this new cycle in your life. There's a lot to say with Fred Grandy. We'll be right back. Fred Grandy is our guest. You know him as Gopher on Love Boat, but you will soon hopefully know him as a congressman, a House of Representatives, representing the northwestern part of Iowa. When is the election?
Well, it's in November, the first Tuesday in November.
You go against a man who's held that seat for 12 years, for 6 terms.
6 terms, that's correct.
How do you fight an incumbent like that?
Hand to hand. You have to go, in my case, you have to kind of bridge what I call the Gopher gap. Everybody knows me, but they really know me from clips like the one that you just showed. So what I have to do is run a very retail kind of campaign and speak to as many people as I can to let them kind of see the difference between the character and the candidate. And that's where I think the real decision will be made.
Will showbiz in any way, as your background, be detrimental to you? I mean, will you get criticism for that?
I'll get criticism, but at least they'll be paying attention. See, I know that 75 cents of every campaign dollar goes into just getting people to remember your name. I already have a very high recognition factor in my area, and what I have to do is translate that into a credibility.
You say you live life in cycles, but politics is hard work. I mean, why leave something kind of cushy, very cushy, for this kind of hard work?
Because I'm too young to retire, Eileen. I'm only 37 years old. I'm not in this for a pension. My feeling is if people at this stage of their life don't get involved, then they kick it up to those people that become the career bureaucrats, the people that form those good old boy networks, that make those bureaucracies, that keep us from having effective government. I'm very lucky because I've made enough money in a short amount of time so that I can afford to take this reduction.
Well, that's good.
And if not now, it probably won't happen. If not now, when, right?
You wrote the farewell speech that we'll see probably in May.
Assuming it's not edited.
Yeah. What did you say?
Well, I just basically said goodbye and thank you to all the people that I'd worked with. And I tried to do it in such a way so that when I said goodbye to the captain, I was saying goodbye to Gavin. And they were very nice. The writers and producers of the show were very nice in letting me do that. I asked if I could do that, and they said okay. And so I tried to construct a speech where I could individually go around and say to every person on the show what they meant to me. Now, whether or not that'll come across, I don't know. But it was, for me, a nice personal way to say adios.
It's coming across to me now that it's still emotional for you.
Yeah, well, it is. It was, we were mates, you know, and they have been so supportive of me in this new effort that you really wonder if political parties are necessary, if you can just kind of band together, if it's really necessary to have that kind of superstructure of Democrats and Republicans over that.
You said to me in the green room, I'm now the captain of my own ship.
That's
There's
right.
A sign that says
That's right.
Fred Grandy for Congress.
A former shoe store in Sioux City with my name out in front, and I got 5 people working for me, and I'm the boss. I've never had that experience.
We can understand when you draw the analogy that you drew with me before the show, we can understand the politics of Iowa when you say it's much like what happened here in the Northeast years ago. It's happening now in Iowa.
Yes, it is. And basically, this is the agricultural economy of the world, and in a smaller, in a microcosm, Iowa is going to contract. We've got more, we produce more than we can eat. But the problem is that Iowa's biggest commodity is its people, and they're draining out of the state because there's nothing for them to do.
And you've got to keep people.
Exactly. And for farmers right now, that doesn't mean necessarily giving them more government money. It's allowing them to restructure their debt so they can become businessmen again, because the work ethic out there is something that we should be broadcasting to the hinterlands. When Iowans go to Oklahoma or Dallas, they get a job like that because they have such an industrious reputation.
So you say, go ahead and support them financially, and then you can recycle the people.
I'm not saying support them to the point where you're just bailing them out. I'm saying give them a chance to become businessmen again, just the way you gave Chrysler the chance, Continental Bank of Illinois, and Argentina and Brazil.
What are we doing with our funding in the rest of the world that we're not doing for our farmers here in the United States?
Well, I think that we're probably giving them lower interest rates in terms of places like countries in South America, and I think that we are basically allowing them to become competitive in the world marketplace and not allowing ourselves to become competitive in the world marketplace.
What would happen, final question, if you don't win?
Well, People ask me that when I was an actor. What'll happen if you don't get the job? And I say, well, I'll go out and try and get another job. I may run again. That certainly is not ruled out. But I spent 15 years trying to become an actor slash star. I certainly can spend more than one trying to run this dream down. And I also have enough of a belief in myself that I'll generate something. I mean, I've always been kind of a product of shrewd cunning and fortuitous accident, I guess. And somehow in there, I'm sure it'll all be right.
I know your heart's in the right place, and for that reason, I wish you the best of luck. And
well,
I think you'd be very good for Iowa, or good that anywhere you go. You have the background, and again, I say you have the heart. Thank you, Fred. Great to see you again.
Nice to see you again.
Really. God bless. Lots of luck.
You
Fred
too.
Grandy. We'll be right back.
And when we come back...